little while of waiting, it's finally here. This is the video review of my Tokai Love Rock Les Paul copy. So before we talk about this guitar in particular, let's wind the clock back a little bit and go back to the 1970s. So as you know, the Les Paul guitar, which this is clearly based on, was invented by an American manufacturer called Gibson, who obviously still produce them to this day. These guitars are very, very nice, but very, very expensive. During the 70s and then into the 80s, a lot of Japanese manufacturers, one of them being Tokai, started creating what would later be known as the lawsuit era guitars. Now these were guitars that were built to be basically, like this is, exactly the same as the original instrument, but because it was made in the East at the time, costing a lot less. And this annoyed companies like Gibson and Fender because these guitars were so close to theirs and sometimes surpassed them in quality and were so close in how they looked. I know that Gibson in particular have issues of how some companies do their headstocks, for example, that they ended up suing them. So they were caught up in loads of lawsuits, hence why all these guitar companies ended up being known as lawsuit era guitars. So other than Tokai, other ones to think of are Ibanez, who are still around, and one who I don't think makes guitars anymore that I've done a previous video on, you can find it here, is Kiso Suzuki. Due to these lawsuits, a lot of the guitar companies, like Ibanez for example, later went on to make models that were more distinctly their own. Some just fizzled out entirely, like I mentioned Kiso Suzuki, but some, like Tokai, sort of stuck around doing, for the most part, more blatant copies of these American-style guitars. I think they've done an odd few design that's sort of more their own, but they're mostly known for making Gibson and Fender copies. Well, the big question is, are they any good? Well, they're good enough for me to want to buy them. Now, a couple of years ago when I got this guitar, I was out on the look for a Les Paul. And I'd actually done some work experience in a guitar shop where they stocked Gibsons, and so I was playing loads and loads of Les Pauls. I played sort of the studios, I played the standards, I played the customs, even the proper, like, 3 or 4 grand. And when you talk grand in this video, we're talking Great British Pound kind of grand. Not necessarily US dollars, I don't know what the prices are between those. And some of them felt really, really good, and some of them just didn't. I hear they're getting better with it now, but Gibson was sort of going through this whole era of sort of slightly dodgy quality control. Some guitars coming out really, really nice, some guitars not. If I remember rightly, the most comfortable Les Paul I found in the whole shop to play was actually an Epiphone Les Paul custom. A couple of the Gibsons were really, really strong as well, but for whatever reason, a lot of them just didn't feel that great, and especially not for the price they were worth. So I was thinking, okay, I can get by using an Epiphone. I was looking out for an Epiphone Les Paul custom at that point, and I was thinking, okay, I'll get the Epiphone instead, and I will modify, you know, change the hardware, change the pickups, everything like that to try and make it more Gibson-y. And I wandered into a shop, and I saw this thing, and immediately, that if I wasn't going to get a Black Beauty style custom, I wanted a gold top. I saw it, and then I realised it was Tokai, and I was like, I've heard of those. I've heard really good things, but I've never played one. Well, I asked to have a go at it, and I couldn't leave the shop without it. Now, if I remember rightly, I bought this for second-hand, this was, for £699, or was it £7.99? I'm pretty sure it was £6.99. New, the Japanese-built Tokais, because there are Korean and Chinese ones, but the Japanese-built ones, I think they're around about £1,300. So yeah, an absolute steal, especially, you know, if you're looking for a Les Paul or just a guitar in general on the second-hand market, Gibsons will retain their value quite well. You know, a Les Paul standard that's around about $2 grand, it's going to be still within $1 grand and a bit. Whereas this was, well, way under $1 grand. A very reasonable price. Only about £100 or £200 more I was going to pay for the Epiphone for this. And compared, very little I would need to do to this guitar. It is really that good. Now, before we talk about all the specs and everything, of course, there are some caveats with this guitar, being that it was a second-hand. There is some checking and everything. So, for example, I have a bit of checking there. You can see that on the neck. There's bits around here. There's a bit of discoloration on the pickup. I'm not sure if you can see that quite well. And the tuning peg for the D string is a little bit dodgy, but other than that, it's a brilliant, brilliant guitar. Now, you know I'd mentioned about how I'd played a whole load of Gibson Les Pauls before this. This feels, to me, like it's a $2.5 grand Les Paul, and it's way, way cheaper than that. So you can see why companies like Gibson and Fender wanted to sue companies like Ibanez and Tokai. If you can get a guitar that feels and sounds so much like their own guitars for so much cheaper. I don't care that it says Tokai, I'm not much enough of a brand snob. Similarities of Gibson, pretty much completely. This is I believe it's a 2-piece mahogany body, a mahogany neck, rosewood fretboard, and a maple cap. Now, sometimes with Eastern guitars or cheaper guitars, you have a whole thing of saying, oh, well, is it a cap or is it a veneer? Those who don't know the difference, a cap would be where you have mahogany along the whole along the bottom here, and then the top where the binding is covering it, it's carved maple. It's a proper chunk of maple. A veneer would be where you have mahogany all over it, and you have like a very, very, very thin bit of maple. Well, I can prove it on here due to a little bit of discoloration in the neck. You see there's our maple coming through just where the just under the binding. That's how thick this maple cap is. Now, being a gold top, it's got a completely opaque paint, so if it has a flame top, who knows, or a quilted top, I think it looks so good, so who cares, honestly? Lovely, brilliant guitar. Now, some things it even keeps are certain more classic things, such as the little indicators on the tone and volume pots, sort of pointing to 10, which I really like, and I think it's a shame that a lot of Les Pauls don't have those anymore, because it's only one small bit of metal. You can buy them from places like Gibson and put them in. I think it's just a nice little feature to have. This guitar feels so comfortable. It's brilliant to play. When I buy a guitar, I think there's two schools of thought that people go in with when they're buying a guitar. It either has to sound fantastic or feel fantastic, and I'm a feel person. Luckily for me, this guitar also sounds really epic. It sounds really good. But it's so comfortable, whereas I found that some Les Pauls are really not comfortable. It's got a chonker of a neck, it's nice and thick. I do like a thick neck, but it's not too sort of wide. Occasionally you get guitars that are sort of uncomfortably wide. This one's nice and thick, you get a good chunk of wood in the hand, really comfortable for soloing and chording. I love it. But yeah, it was so comfortable to play, and that was really my big gripe, and the big thing that put me off a lot of the Gibsons I was playing in those shops is that they just didn't feel comfortable. Whereas this being sort of same guitar, it feels like it was made so well that it's just super comfortable. The fretboard was nice and smooth as well. Good job on the frets. Obviously, this being second hand, I can't say much for buying new. Who knows? Maybe this was a rougher player when it was first got, and the previous owner changed it. But for how it's felt for me, it has been a brilliant guitar. Downsides, it's very heavy. I'm pretty sure it has no chambering. The socket keeps breaking on me, unfortunately, so I might have to get that changed. I spoke about the detuner, but that's just, I think, because it was second hand. But one design flaw I wish they would have sorted. Just as another quick background, something that Tokai was doing when it was first coming around, sort of like the 70s and 80s, doing these guitars, they were doing sort of throwback designs to the older versions of these guitars. So as, you know, Les Pauls or Strats or whatever were changing and evolving throughout the 70s and 80s from what they were in the 50s, these guitars were made to sort of be like the more vintage ones, because those guitars are now starting to be seen as more vintage. But I feel like this has done it to a fault, and I'll show you what I mean by that. The headstock of a Les Paul is well known for not being trustworthy because it's at such a break angle that the head can become very brittle and can be easily broken if hit. Now, something that they did around about the late 70s, early 80s, I believe, is they added in what's called a flute, which I have on my actual lawsuit era Kisa Suzuki copy of a Hummingbird video there. If you look, it has on the back a flute. It's just a very minor ridge in the wood. It makes chords and everything feel nice and comfortable. It doesn't get in the way at all, but it just makes the head that much stronger. It's such a good idea, and when Gibson sort of got stuck into what Trev Wilson likes to call Nostalgia Corner, I believe, they took this off because, oh, it's not like the 59s, they didn't have that. But you can want to regain the magic of those old guitars, but if something like this fixes the design flaw and is just such a minor thing, it should be kept. And that is one big criticism I have of my Tokai Love Rock, is the fact that it doesn't have it. This guitar was made in 2003. I understand that a lot of people like the sort of the more traditional designs, but it's such a good idea to have that and Tokai, because they're not Gibson, they don't need to have to lock themselves down into Nostalgia Corner. They could just put it in and just say, it makes it stronger, it makes it better, but they didn't. That's my one major criticism of this guitar. So you've heard enough of me talking. Let's give the guitar a listen. So what we've got here is, it's going to be the guitar going through a couple of pedals, going straight into my Laney VH100R. That's my amp. It's loaded with EL34s, and I'm recording it with a Shure SM57 and a Rode NT1A, going into an M Audio N Track Plus and going into Pro Tools. Let's give it a listen. So overall, what do I think of it? This is a bloody great guitar. I'm actually thinking about looking for an SG at the moment, and because of this, I'm thinking about looking out for some Tokais and seeing what I think. They are so comfortable. On the second-hand market, they're so reasonably priced because, like I said, unlike a Gibson, they do lose their value as time goes on, but they are still fantastic guitars. It feels just like you're playing a much more expensive guitar, but it's a lot cheaper. Build quality is nice and solid. It is a solid feeling guitar. Like I said, my only downside would be that I wish they'd have put a flute in. But other than that, if you're out looking for a Les Paul and the Gibson prices are just a little bit too high for you, you should definitely see if you can have a play on a Tokai Love Rock. And if you enjoyed, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.